Hi everyone, this is Feleo, and with me is Anthony Vincent Bova for another episode of Acting, Life, and Everything in Between. So,
Morning.
good morning! Today is another interesting topic which you just brought up last night. You wanted to talk about this particular topic because it is interesting not just for the new actors but the more seasoned ones, no?
Yeah. Over the years, so many times an actor would come to me and say, I got the role of a lifetime, but I don't know where to start.
So that's our topic.
That's our topic for today. And by the way, this is not, in martial arts terms, this is not just for white belts. This is for the seasoned 10th degree black belts. Some of the great actors, the legends of our time, they fall into this. What do? You got this great role or a role, or it doesn't have to even be a great role, but you're given this role and you're like, where do I go with this? The reasons why the great actors of today still fall into this, because there's not one answer. There's not one answer. I'm going to give suggestions today, what I find is helpful. You're going to read the script. Right now, for this example, let's assume that it's not a historical character. You're not playing Richard Nixon. It's one of our presidents. You're not playing a historical, because when you're playing a historical character, it's different. You have a ton of research, and many times you'll have videotape, and you could really study. But when you don't, and it's a beautiful role made up, you have to create that. You're the creators, you're the interpreters of this role, and you have to create that role, right? So what do you do? And how do you start? So I don't qualify, I want to just say one more time. These are suggestions. Actors come from it from every different angle.
This is not the one way.
No. So knowing that these are suggestions, you want to ask yourself a basic question. How do I make this real? How do I create the reality? When you ask that question and you read, already certain things will come to you. Where is this character like me and not like me? I'm a proponent for doing a character history because it's important to understand how the character sees the world, how the character sees the environment, how the character sees other characters, what's their socioeconomic status. When you do a character development and a breakdown and a history, I should say, and you do a history, you can write a book this thick on it. That's fantastic and great. But be careful, because that's all intellectual. And sometimes that intellectual process can affect you emotionally, and it'll come and something will be found. Many times it stays as an intellectual process. So what am I getting at is, so many times an actor would have come to me, especially if they're new and they've been studying for years and years in other processes, and they come to me with really a whole book of character history, and I'm like, wow, I'm impressed. This is great. But let me ask you a basic question. How did you create the reality of this? How did this help you? And I keep saying how with the capital H, because that's usually missing. How do you go about creating that reality? And that's where you want to get into the studies of, okay, I'm inspired, I resonate with this character now, I connect to this character. That's great, but how are you creating that reality? How are you creating the reality of how you connect to other characters? And when you read the script, you're going to learn what's most important for you. Is it relationships? Is it the psychology of the character? Is it the emotionality of the character? Is the character completely shut down from life or completely opened up to life? I don't know. What's the thinking rhythm of the character? And that's not looked at a lot, because there's so many times you'll see in a movie, just the process of how one of the characters think is interesting and pulls you to him or away. But at the end of the day, I tell you what I don't advocate for. You want to do your work so answers could come to you, not you try to dig, find, because you can get stuck in your head with that. It's tough. I was looking at an interview just this past week. Wonderful actor, late actor, Paul Savino. I've met him several times, actually. Wonderful man. His big role was in this Goodfellas. He played the head boss in the Goodfellas, right? The head mob boss. Wonderful movie, by the way. If you haven't seen Goodfellas, rent it. And by the way, Paul Savino's an opera singer too.
Oh.
Yeah. When I met him at a dinner once, and we were introduced, and then someone said, "Paul, sing!" And all of a sudden, this gorgeous voice just came out of him. Beautiful man. And he said he couldn't find it. He couldn't find it because he played the head mob boss, and he goes, "That's not my background. I don't know anything about these guys. He's Italian or the whole thing," but it wasn't. He had no connection to that. And it was getting close. I think it was like a week before shooting or a rehearsal or something. And he just couldn't find it. And he said one morning he was just fixing his tie in the mirror and it hit him. Mm-hmm. He found the role. He found where this character lives, how this character thinks, how this character sees. He found it by fixing his tie. Now, you know what that reminds me of? Another late person, my cousin Vincent. He was a brilliant, beautiful man also. And every time we would talk a lot, we'd talk a real lot. We would talk about, the meaning of life and relationships, and we would go through the gamut of everything. He said this more than once. He goes, man, he used to call me by my last name. He's like, Bova, I don't know the answers. I'm going to go to sleep and let my dreams tell me. And
nice.
Yeah, and I'm like, yeah. Basically what that says is when you're like this, trying to find it, it's equivalent to writer's block for the actor. You're not trusting, you let it come to you. Paul Savino and that thing, boom, it hit him when he wasn't looking. And so many times when you're not looking and you could trust and relax, the answers are there if you let it come to you. And that, I think, it's a trust thing, don't you know?
It is a trust thing, Anthony, but I have some questions now that are, coming up. How do you balance it? You're saying, okay, I'm not sure if this is what you're trying to say, but I'm trying to understand it also.
Did I complicate it? I think I did.
Maybe for me.
No.
No, but so the research is vital.
I believe it is, yeah.
The research, especially if it's a profound or a colorful character, or it's within a history or a culture that is very specific, correct? So it's very important that you research. But the purpose of the research is to what?
The purpose of the research is to resonate with who this character is to understand the character. It's hard to interpret this and bring a character to life if you don't understand it. It's very difficult. I see a lot of actors do that, and it's like I'll use stage for this example. They're like reaching for something all the time because they're not comfortable with how this character is resonating with them, and they're trying to reach the character. Does that make sense? Now, I'm going to digress just for a moment. And this could be a whole podcast onto itself. So let's talk about evil for a moment. All right. You got the role of this very, very evil character. How do I act evil? It's the wrong question. It's the wrong questions. And most actors trying to think, what do I do to act evil? No. How do I see the world in an evil way? That's really where you want to go. If you could see the world in an evil way, you're evil. You don't have to act. Just being is in that moment, if that's your POV on the world. And I'm not saying you as the character, you. Then there's no acting. No acting and no acting, please, right? But going back, and I'm sorry if I went off the cliff for a moment, but coming back to your question, you do the research, right? So you understand the character, so you don't have to be the character. You could understand how that could be you. And you could see because you don't want to be the character. You don't want to divorce yourself to try to be something else. I know there are techniques that do subscribe to it. I don't, because as soon as you divorce yourself from the character, then what you're really saying is that it's not really fully authentic. If you could see the world that way, you don't have to act anything. If you could see how, from the perspective, from the point of view of how you've interpreted this character sees, you don't have to act.
Mm.
And I know I'm repeating myself, but it's basic, but it makes a huge difference. If you don't surrender to see the world that way, usually what happens is that you're trying to add on this technique, add on that technique, add on this trick, add on that trick, and you're trying, and you're building, and it complicates things as opposed to making it simple and beautiful.
Yeah, I agree. It invites judgment. So there's like
From yourself or the audience?
From yourself.
Yeah.
It
Oh
invites
God, yeah.
it invites judgment from yourself about the character that you're portraying. So it's still not the POV of the character. It's still your POV doing the character. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and you know what? What happens at that point, I found, and I've seen this a lot. I call it emotional choreography, in which you bring up these emotions if they're part of this character, but it's choreographed. They're not it's not moment to moment.
It's not moment to moment.
It's not moment.
And
to
that's what
moment.
you're always fighting for.
Always fight. Always
Moment
fight.
to moment.
Yeah, moment to moment. And how do you get selfless? How do you get involved in outside of yourself? You know, it's interesting because I'm talking about what you need to do, all this stuff. You're doing that so you don't have to deal with you. That's really why you're doing all this. Imagine it this way. Right now, you're going to run a race. Right now, you're going to run a race. Run, go, right? If you start, there's a good chance, if you just start running a long race, you're going to pull something. And you're going to be running it, and you're going, oh my God, I didn't warm up. Oh my God, I didn't deal with this. Oh my God, I didn't stretch. I didn't do this. Oh my God, I'm not even wearing the right clothes. All this is going to go through your head if you just right now start running a race, most likely, right? Why is that happening? Because you didn't deal with yourself first. You didn't take care of yourself. If you really take care of yourself and you stretch, you prepare, you exercise if you're not in shape for a race, you over time, and then you could run a race, you could focus on the race. It's the same thing with acting. At least from the work we do, you've got to take care of yourself first so you don't have to deal with yourself. Now, watch where that comes in. I really take care of myself and I'm open to work. I am seeing the world in the way I need to see it. I'm invested in selflessly with my colleagues and the cast, all of that. I could just be, but if I'm not there, you know what happens? You're going to start going, oh my God, what do I need to do? How do I do this? How do I do that? Where do I go? How do I do? It becomes a doing process, and that is a split right there. Once you get into that process, you're not really just being and reacting.
I have a question. I have another question. It gets a little complicated. I do have some students who are. How about characters that deal with mental issues? Characters that deal with mental issues or have mental issues. Characters also
Drugs.
Not just drugs, but let's say in the spectrum of autism or bipolar, schizophrenia.
Where do you go with that?
Where do you go with that? Where do you go? Because it's not, you can always do tricks, right? You can always do tricks. You can always start just...
I'm going to switch now.
Yeah, like that. But how do you go about it? What do you
Study, do a lot of, that's where you could do a lot of research. A lot of research. Now, again, always remember the research is intellectual. It's not experiential by nature. Unless you start, once you're in your research, you start adapting yourself to emotionally engaging on that level. But just the research part is in an intellectual process. Well, I keep saying that because that's only the prerequisite. It's not the answer. So you research bipolar. You start try to speak to professionals. Try to go to There's a lot of information out there these days with the internet, YouTube or whatever. If you can go to clinics and experience them live, start to understand them, right? But you really want to understand their values, how they see things, what's their triggers. You want to understand what's their, when I say their value system, what it is that's important to them, good, bad, happy, and sad, and all of that. And the reason why, that's just the beginning. You want to study I go back to their thinking rhythms.
Yeah.
You want to study their physiology. And I always say this, truth is not from the inside out exclusively, and it's not from the outside in exclusively. It's how you find truth. And that's important. I always say that because a lot of people in the work that, especially if we do, the work we do is, I always say, ocean wide and ocean deep. But the shortcoming on how people sometimes view the work is I think it's always inside out, emotionally, inside out. And it's not. Truth comes to you many different ways. It came to Paul Savino by just one day looking in the mirror and fixing his tie, right? Mm-hmm. It comes, and sometimes you don't even know how it's going to come to you, which I love. I want to go back to the Paul thing, all right, just for a moment. What I loved about meeting that wonderful man is the tentacles in him, at least when I met him, seemed to be very open. And what I mean, the tentacles, I meant he seemed to be really open to life. He seemed to be very open to stimuli coming in and touching him and this and that. That's a beautiful thing, because if you're open, if you really work on saying, I'm going to open myself up to this, I'm going to open myself up as a daily practice, you'll be touched, things will come in. But if you come in with blinders, how do I do it? You're going to have problems.
But Paul Savino, as a person, his makeup is really, he was brought up, or he grew up being that available and open to, it's his make. But even, I want to say, even that in itself, it's a skill. Because there are a lot of people who are naturally not that sensitized.
Or sensitive. Yeah.
To pick up on the stimuli.
Yeah. You know who's coming up now? Philip Seymour Hoffman.
I love him. He's really one of my favorite actors.
Yeah. Forgive me, because I saw this a while ago, and I might even, he was on Broadway around 7 years ago, 10 years ago. Was it Death of a Salesman? Did you play Willie Loman? I think that was it. I forget now. But I remember him doing an interview in which, if you Google Seymour Hoffman interviews or preparation, you'll find it. But I remember that he'd be in his dressing room, and I think it was, he would just have different expressions looking in the mirror for hours and hours and hours and hours and hours until something hit him. I think it was that he would try and try and try, and then from what I understood of him, never met him, that something eventually hit. Something will hit. You know, acting is reacting, right? I say it all the time, but same thing in looking for, when you're searching for where the character is. You put something out, does it hit? This is where the character lives. Now I'm going to contradict everything. No matter where it hits, no matter how honest and truthful it is for you, you have to be, in my opinion, ready to toss it out in a second.
Yeah. Maybe.
You can't fall in love and get married to everything you do. Why? Because the director, you can go in and the director could say, oh boy, that is so not where we're going for this. It gets in a completely different, and you're like, really? I just spent 1 billion hours trying to figure that out? I feel, Your ego can't be involved. You've got your job is to, you could fight for your truth, but at the end of the day, you've got to be malleable.
Mm.
If you're not malleable, it's hard to work with you from a director standpoint.
Yeah, that's happened to me a lot. And recently, my actors also, my very hardworking actors, they come to me. We prepare their characters, and I always say, "Oh, this is how we're doing it based on the script and the information that you got from the script writer and the director. But we prepare to adjust." And it's just an adjustment. Don't panic. Don't panic. You're right. Don't get married. Don't fall in love with that one with plan A.
Yeah. Yeah, you have to surrender to plan A because you got to give your everything. But if there's an adjustment that needs to be made, you've got to be malleable. That means you've got to be flexible.
Mm,
That's my point. Being flexible is important. Why? It gives the director more options.
true.
Every time I'm speaking to a director colleague, and we'll talk about actors. They'll say, "He's great, but I can only use him for this exact one type of way because he just has no ability to adjust." Don't be that actor.
Yeah, sometimes it's just maybe the actor's new, maybe the actor is not there in his life yet, maybe the actor's not ready to make that decision yet. I mean, to each his own. But again, on the POV of the director,
Yeah.
again, the bottom line is you must be malleable as an actor because it's a collaboration. But ultimately, it's the vision of the director.
Yeah.
Fair.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It is. It is. That's why there's a director. The director has an image, has a whole vision, and we have to bring that to life and tell that story brilliantly as we know how.
You mentioned a while ago something that, for me, is character work in a nutshell. And that is, how do I see the world?
Right.
How do I see the world? So I guess the research must be in support of that question. Fair?
Fair. There are different responsibilities that the actor may be asked to
Fulfill.
fulfill. Some of it is the period. Is it a period piece?
And current issues like, was there slavery during that time? Was there colonization?
So there's the period piece. Then there's the physical piece.
Mm.
If you're playing the Hunchback of Notre Dame, you better not come in like this, right? If you're playing that character, you have to understand the physical aspect of his character. And once when you work on physicality, it's really cool because it affects your psychology and emotionality. I call it two ways. Externals is one way. That's when you working for an object, another person, an insect, an essence. When you work for it, it affects you in so many different ways. Or working externally, which is if you're just walking and you make this your leading center, and you walk that being your leading center, you're not working for an animal or anything. You're just walking with your head as leading. You're going to feel differently.
Mm.
And when you work with your shoulders as the leading center, it's going to be different than your head, so on and so forth, right?
Mm.
But when you explore all of that, and something could click in. This is where the home of this. I was working with an actor around a year and a half ago, more or less, and he was working for a historical character, and he did a lot. Now this is not what I was saying before. It's different. Studying a lot of YouTube, study, and he started to work for him externally. He started to find it. Started to work on, listen to him, how he sees, how he connects to people, his value system that he got from that. Got it. But for this actor, it was the voice that hit him. His voice, I can't do it, but it was kind of back here. It was nasal too, I think, right?
Mm.
And once he did that, he went boom. This is where it is. It's in the, I found him in from, now, I was just talking about physical externals. Externals to me is with the voice as well.
Mm,
If you start to speak differently
mm,
from the voice, it affects how you think, right?
mm.
So if you speak with a southern drawl, or if you speak and with an accent, from
Or
a,
even if you just lower
even
your
though you
register,
register, and you kind of,
it feels different.
hi baby.
Yeah.
Yeah, right? In the exploration of the voice, and with him, when he connected to the voice, he was like, "Poof," it came to him.
Those actors who explore a character that is real, so nonfiction.
Nonfiction. Right?
Yeah, that's a challenge, right? But also, it's also a challenge to start from scratch.
Yeah.
Like Johnny Depp in Pirates of the Caribbean. That was from scratch, wasn't it?
Yes, it was from scratch.
Didn't he use externals for that?
Yes.
What's the name? Is it a person or
Yes,
an animal?
yes. I'm going to say it wrong. Go to the interview, correct me. But I think he worked for Jimi Hendrix. And if it's not Jimi Hendrix, I think I screwed this up once before. I said the wrong one. I did, but it's one of those.
It's one of those rock stars.
Yes.
Musicians.
Yes, 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 yes.
Correction. It was Keith Richards, not Jimi Hendrix.
He worked for him for that, and I found that fascinating. And on
Edward Scissorhands.
Edward Scissorhands, Eric Morris actually went to the set for that one.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
He went out of his studio.
Oh
Oh, wow.
He was helping out the set. Yeah, he worked with Depp with that for I don't think a lot, but he worked with him a bit on there, from what I understand. Notice I'm not telling you it's this, this, and this. I'd rather really work on how to think about it,
How to approach it.
how to open yourself up to possibilities, rather than say you have to do 1, 2, and 3. Because even in these examples I'm saying now, they're all different ways. But let's talk about the X factor that all of them, I want to believe they have in common. It's trust. You've got to believe that it'll come to you. If you trust it will. If you come with such resistance and fear and you've got to trust that there's not one answer. There's many answers. It'll hit you if you could open yourself up and trust it'll hit you. So there's some work in the beginning that I think you have to go and explore the different responsibilities. You got to get some clarity with that. There's different responsibilities. You want to look, from my standpoint, a lot at the relationship. Now you say relationship, what happens if it's a scientist and he's in a lab by himself and he's not even working with people? Well, what's his relationship to the chemicals, to the science, to the topic? You see, it's not always
A person.
a person. What's his relationship to
His work. His research.
his work, his research? How about this? If you're playing a character that's an advocate of some cause, what's the relationship to the cause? Right?
Yeah.
I can't leave without telling this little tidbit here. One of my favorite actors is John Cazale. He was the one that played Fredo in The Godfather, but Dog Day Afternoon, he did quite a few movies with Al Pacino. And Al Pacino, he considers John Cazale one of his biggest influences, really has so much respect for him. And he said that, this is Al Pacino in an interview, because John passed away quite a few years ago. He said that when he would rehearse with John, that John would ask questions.
Mhm.
So Al, he had this, so Al, and he'd ask these questions. What if this happened? Or what if that happened? And Al said it wasn't about finding the answers. It wasn't about having an answer. I got to have an answer. What if it was about opening the tentacles to discover.
Mm.
So when and I call them tentacles. What else am I going to open open up to discover these answers. And then he said, and then John Cazale was slowly, you wouldn't even see the shift. And he would take on this life from this place. And I remember Al saying that he wasn't even sure where it was beginning, kind of thing. That's working seamlessly. What's the point in this? Ask questions, ask questions. And when you ask questions without being so hell-bent, you gotta have an answer. Answers will come, maybe not that second.
Mm-hmm.
It'll help with the discovery of learning where that character lives in you. And I just had to really put that out, because if you stop asking questions, you're done. You're done. And if you have all the answers, that's a boring actor. You've got to explore, and you've got to discover and keep discovering. I loved John Cazale so much. I always felt his work was so simple and honest. Anyway.
Yeah, that's
Nice,
so wonderful. It's questions. Keep asking questions, regardless if you get the answers. But I guess asking the questions, it makes you available to whatever might stimulate you.
Yes. And what you want to avoid, in my opinion, is, asking questions and always concluding a dead-end answer. Because then the discovery it stops. And once your discovery stops, it's hard to have a new impulse, a new discovery, if you're just concluding everything like that.
Mm-hmm.
So to ask the questions, and some answers will come, but keep yourself open is my suggestion on that.
Mm-hmm.
I leave frustrated. I leave frustrated because this is like the tip of the iceberg of the beginning of the beginning of the beginning of this much of that much of how to go about character development, how to find the character. And the part that frustrates me, I'll be frank about it, is that I'm so much about a system of 1, 2, and 3, but in a podcast. I'm not teaching a class right now, so I can't. So in this podcast, I'm trying to be a bit more broad about it, because there are people that don't know the work that we do, but it applies to them. This applies to actors in general, not just actors that do our work. So I hope you had a good time.
Yeah,
what do you
this was
think?
fun. This one's fun, and I would like to continue this talk about character development and eventually get into character work, maybe. So thank you. I hope you guys enjoyed. I enjoyed this talk.
I had a good time.
You talk more, but that was fun. And I love listening to you.
I blabbered, didn't I? I went on and on and on.
No, but it's good, because sometimes you tell me talk some more, but I love listening to those golden nuggets that you also you bring out. You share with us.
Oh no, keep talking. Tell me more.
But you know what? We do encourage that you comment if you're watching this on YouTube. We do encourage that you ask questions also, or if you are on Spotify, I think there is a question box or a comment box there. Please do send us your messages, and if you have questions, please send them to us. And we hope to see you again. We hope you listen to us and eavesdrop next week.
Yeah.
For acting, life, and everything in between. This has been Anna Feleo and Anthony Vincent Bova. Cheers!